Hello, I'm Kasan Go. I'm a director at Clay Architecture, and today I'm making a presentation about the proposed winery and visitor center in Meopham. This is a live planning application, so not all the issues have been resolved. We are in discussions with the council and with the consultees at the moment, but this is meant to give an overview of the project and try to dispel any misunderstandings or misinformation that is being passed around at the moment. This is a view of the site. Over here, it's a 25-acre site on a hillside. Of the 25 acres, only 5 acres have been cultivated with vines. The applicant is seeking to expand its vineyard, and this is being held back by the fact that it has no on-site facilities. The success of the vineyard depends on an on-site winery and a visitor center, which they would use for wine tourism. The site is set within the green belt, and it's opposite Kent Downs AONB. The site was chosen through the site for the winery was chosen through consultation with Gresham Borough Council, and it was decided that the best place for a winery would be in the northernmost corner of the site, surrounded by tall trees and a hedge. This is a simulated view of the site from the AONB across to the east, looking westwards, and this shows the facility hidden by the trees. This is a simulation of this view from the site from the south, looking northwards. And there you have a very dense line of trees. Over here is White Hill Road, and this is a simulation of the winery set into the hillside. We carried out pre-consultation with Gresham Borough Council, and this included preliminary highways comments from Gravesham Highways. We had pre-consultation with the Kent Downs AONB officer and pre-consultation with the Kent Biodiversity officer. On board our team, we have an ecologist, a civil engineer, a transport consultant, and a acoustician. Kent Highways will be consulted as part of the planning process. We are also applying to pre-consult with the environmental agency. The 4 siting options were discussed with the council before agreeing on the best position for a winery, as shown in the previous slides. The top half of this slide shows the previous scheme by CC Studio, which was used for the pre-application with Gravesham. Gravesham were concerned about the 6-meter high building, which sits on the hillside, and its impact on the hillside. So in response to Gravesham Borough Council's comments, you have the sketches on the bottom half of the slide, which show our idea of taking CC Studios' project, for instance, and moving the 6-meter tall building and burying it within the ground so that all you see is half of the building. This was an early sketch scheme of the idea. However, after doing that sketch scheme, it occurred to us, what if we consolidated the building into one building rather than a 6-meter and a 3-meter tall building, but have it as one single building and set the whole thing in the hillside and design the roof to try and blend with the hillside more. This is something that we discussed with Kent Downs AONB, and they like the idea. The site sits within Happy Valley Local Wildlife Area, which is this area bounded here by the footpath. We worked with an ecologist to come up with a strategy to combine agriculture with biodiversity, so they two don't have to be exclusive of one another. Now over here is the existing vineyard, and the proposal is to expand the vineyard in this yellow line here. So it goes from 5 acres to 14.5 acres. We keep a local wildlife area here, so this will be a special biodiversity area, which will be planted with grasses and meadowgrass. And the base of the hill at the bottom of the vineyard will also be planted with grassland and with shrubs. We will be increasing the we'll be putting in native hedgerow, 626 linear meters of new hedgerow, and adding a attenuation pond which will also support wildlife. Special grasses will be planted around the footpaths and within the vineyard, so the whole site will be agriculture combined with biodiversity. This was, we consulted with the Kent Biodiversity Officer on this at a very high level, and in principle they agree with the strategy for combining agriculture and biodiversity. Here we zoom into the site in greater detail. So that is your entranceway of Whitehill Road, a new driveway which is carved along the side of the tree line, and then this is the proposed winery. So here we have existing footpaths which we're not changing. We will create a crossing across the driveway. The yellow areas are the extended vineyard. This hatched area here is the local wildlife area, so it will be enhanced wildlife area. So the idea is to excavate the hill here and build the winery into the hill. The spoil that comes from excavation will be used to build a bund that will not only mask the mass of the winery, but will also be used along the side of the road of the driveway, and that will be planted with hedgerows. So this would all reduce the impact of the development on the landscape. The idea for the bund was actually suggested by the Kent Downs AONB officer. So all in all, you will have a building sitting on here which is excavated and put in, and then the spoil would conceal that, and you'll be surrounded by wildlife area and vineyard. The bottom of the vineyard, the vine growing area, will be planted with scrubland, and then there will be grassland below, and this is where we will have an overspill car park, and will also be the route for tractors to access the vines. So here you have the ground floor plan, or the lower ground floor plan. It's actually more functions like a basement, and here you have the upper floor plan of the winery. So with the lower floor plan, you come up the drive. So this is for production. You come up the drive and you turn into the production area. So this is your winery yard with parking for staff, and then we have a turnaround space for refuse trucks, for fire trucks if necessary, and for deliveries. So the whole of the production area is actually built into the ground. So this grey area indicates the ground around this space. So it's effectively functioning as a basement. So when you come in here, the winery area is divided into admin, toilets, a kitchen to prepare food for the wine tasting area upstairs, and then here you have the wine processing area for your wine presses and your destemmers, and for your wine vats, which can vary from 4 to 6 meters tall. And then in this area you have a cool store where the processed wine will be left to age for anywhere from 9 months to 36 months. And over here we have a equipment store. So here they will store tractors and various equipment required for tending to the vineyard. Here you have the upper plan. So if you're a visitor, you do not turn into this way. You come up, slightly up the hill into a flat area where we have parking. Total parking for the site is 27 parking spaces. And then you will enter the upper area through here. So there's a kind of a walk-through. The upper floor area, most of it is void. So this 2/3 of it is just void above the basement area. And this allows some height for the vats, the wine tanks, and the storage of stillages. And then over here you have the visitor center, which when you come through the entrance you will have a retail area and then a wine tasting area. And then there are toilets. So this area looks out over the valley and opens out onto a terrace. So you have outside seating. So in total you have about enough seating for space for 30 visitors on the inside and 30 visitors on the outside. Total of 60 visitors. This shows a section through the site. It shows the vineyard being built into the hillside. This is White Hill Road, and this is the track that we're building to come up to the site. And it shows the operations area, which is lower in the kind of basement type space, and the visitor area at the upper floor area. This is another section that shows how you get into it. So you come up, and you slide up, and you come up to the upper floor area. This is a section across the building, which shows how the building is set into the hillside, with the wine production area at the lower kind of operations area at the lower ground level, and the visitors at the upper ground level here. This shows a detail of the view from the south, which is equivalent to the view from the Greenbelt area. And it shows again, this is all of the building that you would see from the south, which is the upper floor area with a maximum height of 4 meters sloping down. And you can see from the green line here that most of the building is hidden from view. Below, this is the view from the east, and again, most of the building is hidden from view. These white lines here are the surveyed heights of the trees in 2018. So the trees were about 12 meters high, they would have grown taller. So this is the tree cover, and this is what you see roughly from the AONB site. Above here is a view from the loft looking southwards, and again you see this little white bit here is what you will see. This is a view that few would see because it's screened by a whole wooded area, and the building is buried, so all you will see would be that. This is the view from the west, and again you see that the building is substantially below ground. Here's the building here with the little roofs peeking up above, but that grey line indicates the slope line, and that line there indicates the line of the operations area. So that's how much of the building you'll actually see, not very much at all. So to reiterate, this is the view from the east, the simulated view from the east. This simulation was built using actual trees and actual height and survey information, so it's fairly accurate about levels and trees. And here we show the view from the south again. Again, now you understand that only a single story, 4 meters or lower, showing above ground, and the rest of it below ground. This is significantly less than the 6 meter tall building that was presented at pre-consultation with Gravesham. So at pre-consultation, the original design was building 6 meters above the slope level. The revised and submitted proposals have, what you can see is a building that is 4 meters or less above the slope level. The building is largely screened by earthworks, hedges, and the copse of trees along White Hill Road. The proposed driveway will be hidden from view by mound and new hedgerow. We have had fairly extensive consultations with Kent Downs AONB. We're still discussing issues with her, but she is largely satisfied that the new proposals significantly mitigate the impact of the proposed development and will have a low impact on the landscape. So the existing site, in terms of biodiversity, the existing site is mainly species-poor grassland, bounded with native hedgerows and deciduous woodland edge. The proposed enhancement include adding 626 meters of native species-rich hedges, adding wildflower grassland to the biodiversity area, and wildflower grassland to the attenuation pond, mixed species shrub border to the vine area, calcareous grassland to the field margins and beneath the hedgerows. And there will be grass species sown between the vine crop chosen to enhance ecology as well. We consulted the Kent Biodiversity Officer at a high level, and she agrees in principle with the strategy. The interesting thing about biodiversity is actually it improves the quality of the wine. It increases its resistance of the vines to disease and introduces pollinators to the area. So actually it is also very good for agriculture. There have been some concerns about bottling. Bottling of the wines is a small part of the operations at the winery and does not occur all year round. A small bottling plant, for instance, can bottle up to 3,000 bottles per hour. An entire year crop, say 90,000 bottles, can be bottled in 30 hours, spread over a 16-week period. So we're talking about a week's worth of bottling spread over a 16-week period, which is the harvest period. Bottling times will be staggered as white wines, red wines, and sparkling wines all have different processes and aging periods. Winery processes, including bottling, all occur below ground level. The building is buried up to 6 meters into the hill. Ground acts as a natural sound absorber. We have engaged an acoustician who has made preliminary calculations into the impact of any noise. The noise to neighboring houses will be minimal. He estimates that it will be about 15 decibels, which is hardly audible. We will meet any requirements for survey or mitigation put to us by the Council's technical consultees. This is an example of bottling plant used for bottling wine. We haven't gone into great detail here, but you can see even the bottling plant is enclosed. So that enclosure might itself reduce the amount of noise coming from the bottling process. This is an extract from our transport assessment. The worst period for traffic coming to and from the winery is estimated to be during the summer months at weekends. So during the weekends you would have permanent staff manning the visitor center, you would have wine tours, you would have visitors to the winery, and they have calculated a total of 73 trips per day during the weekend at the worst periods in the summer. Looking at the entrance, adequate visibility exists to meet DMRB standards, subject to cutting back the hedgerows. Goods vehicles, 1 to 2 larger vehicle trips per week during the bottling period of March to June. So deliveries and collections will mainly occur during the peak period between March and June, and maximum of 1 to 2 vehicles per week. Most visitors and agricultural staff will be ferried to and from site by minibus, which seat 15 persons each. One minibus is equivalent to 7 cars, so this reduces the number of trips. It is important to understand that most of the visitors will be coming through wine tours and wine trails, and the operators of these tours and trails do this exclusively by minibus. The winery also has its own minibus, which it uses to ferry agricultural staff. We're investing in a minibus to collect visitors from the major train stations around Ebbsfleet, Gravesend, Meopham, and ferry them to and from the site. This will reduce the car journey significantly and also enable people to drink when they come to visit the site. So the 73 total trips is equivalent to an average of 8 trips, arrivals and departures, an hour. So that's 8 vehicles using Whitehill Lane an hour at weekends during the summer season only, which can easily be accommodated by the local highways network. During the weekdays, it will be significantly less, so there will be 22 total trips a day for staff managing the site during the weekdays. So the worst case scenario will be 73 total trips, which is equivalent to 8 trips per hour. But on a day-to-day basis, numbers are more likely to be much less, 22 total trips. It's also important to point out that the larger vehicle trips, let's say delivering of bottles or collecting of bottles, will occur during the weekdays rather than during the weekends. Proposals will create jobs for the area. So vineyard maintenance, which include pruning, bud rubbing, bud tucking, wiring, grass and weed control, dealing with disease and pests, trimming of wires, will create an additional 30 part-time jobs. This is equivalent to 6.45 full-time equivalents. Now these will be sourced locally. The winery uses local agents, and most of this are semi-skilled labor and will be sourced locally, and they would come from the surrounding areas. Visitor Center Winery. Now this will be office staff, cellar door shop, winery production, kitchen staff, vineyard tours and tasting. These will create 12 new jobs, which will be equivalent to 8.4 full-time equivalents. Again, these will be mainly locals. I have to stress that, especially agriculture staff, these will be brought to site by minibus. Harvest will need an additional 37 pickers. I think in total, Harvest will need something like 62, but 37 on top of what they already use. This, though, is very short term, 3 days work once a year during the harvest period. So this hasn't been counted in our calculations for the job creation. Discounting the harvest, the development will lead to a net employment of 14 to 15 full-time equivalents. In conclusion, the proposed facilities are critical to the sustainability and growth of the vineyard to its full potential. The vineyard has been in existence for 15 years and has been hampered by a lack of facilities, which is why up to now, in its 15 years, it has not been able to extend the cultivation area beyond the 5 acres. So this is critical to the project. Steeply sloped, unproductive agricultural land will be transformed into prime vineyard with enhanced biodiversity and wildlife features. The visitor center allows the winery to diversify into sustainable rural tourism and attract visitors through wine trails and wine tours, which, through a sustainable transport strategy, will keep number of journeys low and have a low impact on local road networks. Kent Downs AONB have been consulted on the proposals and are satisfied that the impact on the landscape will be low. The expanded vineyard and winery will create 14 to 15 new full-time equivalent jobs. By drawing in tourists, the winery will deliver wider benefits to local shops, pubs, restaurants, B&Bs and hotels. The proposed vineyard expansion and new winery visitor centre is a positive development for the local rural economy of Meopham. Proposals are compatible with national policies for protecting the green belt and will promote the appropriate expansion and diversification of the rural area economy.